This week's parsha, PARSHAS BEHAR BECHUKOSEI, the last two parshas of Sefer Vayikra. I would like to speak about three topics Be'ez Hashem this morning. Number one, what we find in the Poskim in regard to two parshas connected. It's not only relevant to this week, we have just had a few other parshas connected. Number two, in this parsha, PARSHAS BECHUKOSEI, we find the kriya of the Teichecha. So to go through some dinim and hanhagis that is already mentioned in the Gemara. And lastly, the minig of saying chazak after every sefer. The Maram Mintz, the Mishnah Berurah brings the Maram Mintz, says that when we have two parshas connected, the person that gets the aliyah at the end of PARSHAS BEHAR, or any two parshas together, that's supposed to, his aliyah is supposed to go into the next parsha. In other words, we literally connect the two parshas. You want to give Isafas, so technically that's a good place to stop. There's many places you could stop for Isafa. So for sure, at the end of the parsha is an amazing place to stop, because when the parshas are not connected, that's where you stop. So he says that you're supposed to continue. The one who gets the aliyah at the end of PARSHAS BEHAR, he's supposed to continue his aliyah into PARSHAS BECHUKOSEI. That's how you connect the two parshas. The Shari Ephraim says that this aliyah of the one who gets the aliyah that connects the two parshas should be Revi. Now, if you take a look, it is Revi, how it's set up, it's always Revi. But he says that should be the middle aliyah, so it should be symmetrical. These three aliyahs in the first parsha, three aliyahs in the second parsha, and the Revi, the seventh aliyah, you're supposed to have 7 aliyah Shabbos. The Revi is in the middle, both parshas. And the Taz says, the Mishnah Berurah brings it, that even if you're going to make Isafas, you're going to add on aliyahs. So really, if you add aliyahs, it comes out that it's not going to be the Revi. It's symmetrical won't be. Let's say you add another 2 aliyahs. So maybe I would think that you should have 4 in the first, 4 in the second, and the 1 in the middle should not be Revi, it should actually be Chamishi. So the Taz says that no, it should always be Revi, because we want it to be in the middle of the aliyahs that are Chiyuv. So there'll be 3 aliyahs of Chiyuv in the first parsha, 3 aliyahs in the second parsha, with the Revi in the middle. Even though there'll be more in the second parsha for Isafas, still the Revi is the middle part, is the middle aliyah. The Revi is the aliyah that connects the two parshas. Lastly, the Bir Halacha says that even though what we just said now is it's better, it's l'tchatchila to have the aliyah, the Revi in the middle, but in cases that you cannot do it, for an example, listen to this example, as we're going to get to in the part 2, kriyas ha-toichecha, by a lot, by most, the minig is that the Baal Koira is the one who gets the aliyah of the toichecha. Where is the kriyas ha-toichecha in the realm of the parsha BEHAR BECHUKOSEI? It's in BECHUKOSEI. So if the Baal Koira is a kohen, how is he going to get that aliyah? So the kohen could be oila first. You read the whole Behar into BECHUKOSEI through the toichecha. So for that, says the Bir Halacha, it's fine, even though you're not going to have it, the one who connects the two parshas is the Revi in the middle. It's going to be the kohen that gets the whole Behar into BECHUKOSEI. It's fine. Atkan is lagabe the part 1 of connecting the two parshas. As we saw, it's better that the Revi should be in the middle to connect the two parshas. Now we'll move over to the kriyas ha-toichecha. The Gemara, it's a Gemara Megillah. The Gemara says that there's a reason why the kriyas ha-toichecha falls out now before Shavuos. Now technically, of course, it's in the Parsha, and that's what we're reading. But really, we had a few Parshas that we connected before. Tazriya Metzayra, Achar Mos Kedoshim. If we wouldn't connect those Parshas, really this BECHUKOSEI would have been after Shavuos. But the Gemara says, one of the many takonas that Ezra was masakin, so the Gemara says Ezra made a takona, Ezra tikin, that Klal Yisrael should lein the toichacha before Shavuos. The Gemara says, Tanya Reb Shimon Elazar Ezra tikin lam Yisrael, that you should read the toichacha klolish b'Torahs kahanim koydem atzeres. And then there's another toichacha, which we're not going to focus on today, but there's another toichacha at the end of the Torah, in Mishnah Torah and Devarim, in Parshas Ki Savoy. That toichacha should be read before Rosh Hashanah. Why? So the Gemara says, Tichla Shana v'kil loisal. Any clawless, any bad things that were supposed to happen should be eliminated, should be finished. We should start a new, fresh year. Therefore, that's why Ezra made a takana to read the klalis of in Devarim before the end of the year, and the klalis in Torahs Kohanim and Parshas in the Chumash Vayikra should be now before Shavuos. So the Gemara asks, wait a second, Bishloimer, the klalis of Parshas Kisav, I understand, it's at the end of the year, it's tak at the end of the year before Rosh Hashanah. But what's about over here, the klalis over here, at the end of what year? So the Gemara says that Shavuos is also Rosh Hashanah le'ilanos. Ubatzeres al peiros ilan, so it's also considered a new year, and that's why Tichla Shana v'kil loisel. Tosfos points out, and that's lahalacha and Shulchan Aruch, it's not actually right before the end of the year, not by Rosh Hashanah, not now also. We're reading the Toichacha this week, BEHAR BECHUKOSEI. This coming week is not Shavuos. We actually have another Shabbos Parshas Bamidbar, and then goes Shavuos. So Tosfos says that we don't want to have it too close to the new year. It could be a kitrug. It shouldn't be that we have the klolos should kind of be laying on the new year. So we make a hefsek. So Tosfos says, brings a B'Shem Rabbeinu Nissim Goyim from the Goyinim. These are Ran Rabbeinu Nissim that's in the back of the Gemara. That's from the Rishonim. And then these Rabbeinu Nissim from the Goyinim before the Rishonim. We want to make a hefsek, a break of the Toichacha to the new year. We want to break it up, and therefore there's a parsha in between. So therefore, that's how we work out the parshas, connecting parshas. And how many parshas? For an example, BEHAR BECHUKOSEI, if we wouldn't connect the two parshas, and next week would be BECHUKOSEI, next week's Kriyas HaToichacha would be connected to Shavuos. We don't want it, we want to break. The Achronim asked the following question, the Yavitz and the Meretz Chias. Ezra made a takana that we should read the Toichacha before Shavuos, before the end of the year. What's about the Bnei Marava? The Gemara says that the Bnei Marava, the way how they split the Kriyas HaTorah, they finished the Torah once in 3 years. Not like how we do it every week, another parsha. They actually had it split. They had smaller portions every week, and they actually finished the Torah once in 3 years. If you take a look at the end of each Chumash, when it says how many psukim of the Ayin Ches psukim in Parshas BECHUKOSEI, then it says like this: how many psukim in Parshas in Sefer Vayikra, and what's the half of the Chumash? How many Parshas are there in Vayikra? It says a Parsha Yosef, these 10 Parshas in Chumash Vayikra, and then it says V'Sidorov Chaf Gimel. In other words, that's the split. The Bnei Marava that read smaller portions, Vayikra wasn't 10 like we have it, was actually 23. And maybe other ones had to drop more, bigger Chumash, but they had 23 because they went slow, was split up into 23 parts. Al Kapanim, the question is, if they were split up into, they did it only once in every 3 years, they finished the Torah. So it didn't fall out over here to be Parshas Vayikra. I'm sorry, Parshas BECHUKOSEI, the Kriyas HaToichacha. And they don't have an answer. They both b'tzarachian. It's a good kasha taka. We was a Kriyas HaToichacha. For us, it falls out. At least we work it out more or less with the Mechubarim. But how did they have the Kriyas HaToichacha? So Reb Tzadok HaKohen, the Rebbe of Lublin, says the following answer, and he says, it's a gewaltige chiddush. He says that just like we have the Dalet Parshas, we learned about it over here, we spoke about it, the takon of the Dalet Parshas was a takana to read, let's say, Shkolim. Even if it's not that parsha, still it's pretty close to that parsha, but you take out a separate Sefer Torah. The point is not the second Sefer Torah, but the point is it's a separate kriya of Dalet Parshas, a separate kriya of Mayadim. So too, Ezra's takana was that there should be a kriya of the Toichacha. Fatich l'shana v'kil lo'iseh. And therefore, if it doesn't fall out, l'bnei ma'rava, that now, before Shavuos was not BEHAR BECHUKOSEI, so they had a separate kriya, the Kriyas HaToichacha. There are two Toichachas, as we mentioned before in the Torah. One over here in Chumash Vayikra and Torah's Kaidim, and one in Devarim. What's the difference between the two Toichachas? So the Zohar says, over there in Parshas Kisavai, the Marshan Bal Basra quotes the Zohar, and the truth is that it's a Ramban in this week's Parsha, that the Toichacha of this week's Parsha is a Toichacha for going Keneged Churban Bayis Rishon, as opposed to the Toichacha later in Devarim is referring to the Churban Bayis Sheni, as well as the Golas Achron. We're still suffering, so to speak. We're still connected to the Toichacha of Devarim. So it's the Zohar, the Scheiner, the Rabbi brings it. So Reb Tzadok explains, based off this Yesod of the Zohar, of the Ramban, that the Toichacha of this week's Parshas for Churban Bayis Rishon, he explains, why is it in the Seder, Ezra made a takana, that we should read the Toichacha before Shavuos and before Rosh Hashanah. But why the Toichacha of Kisavai, that one before Rosh Hashanah, and this one before Shavuos? Now you could tell me, the way we have the parashas broken up, it works out. We're anyways holding by this Toichacha now, and by Devarim is before Rosh Hashanah. But he explains, Ubefrat, how he said the Bnei Marava, that they had a special takana, and they went ahead and they read the Toichacha. Meaning to say is, Ezra's takana was to go ahead and to read the Toichacha. So why is it that we read now the Toichacha of Parshas BECHUKOSEI? So he explains, being that this Toichacha is Keneged Bayis Rishon, and what the Gemara says, really, Yirmiyah Navi says that it's because we didn't listen to the Torah. Ma of the Haaretz. So the Gemara says, our Zaftas Tairasi, we left the Torah. So we read this Toichacha as a chizuk to remember now comes Shavuos to be meschazik in Kabbalas HaTorah. That's why we read this Toichacha, to make up, not to have the Toichacha as a tshuva, as a kapara, to remember comes Shavuos now, we should go strong into be meschazik in Kabbalas HaTorah.
So Rosh Hashanah, we should be meschazik in Al-Tchiram? That's the Avodah Rosh Hashanah?
He speaks about that also. I saw it when I learned. I don't remember now offhand. He speaks about what the connection is. I didn't focus so much on Rosh Hashanah because that's not what we're holding now. And as a matter of fact, the Radvaz, this is the next point, but the same idea also, the Radvaz asks, in Shuvas Radvaz, where are the psukim of Nechama in the Teichecha in Parshas Kisavai. And he has answers, Lamaisa, where the Nachum is. But relevant to us, we're not holding Parshas Kisavai, we're focusing on this Kriya. But over here, Al Kapanim, it's very clear, these psukim of Nechama, the last 2 or 3 psukim, as we'll get to soon, you read it high, it's not part of the Teichecha. Va'afkam zois, right? You'll be in shul, most places the minig is to read the Teichecha low. Though there are places, it's brought Al-Pida Rizal, the minig that Rizal was actually not to read it low. But most places read it low, though the Poskim, the Kesser Shulchan Aruch, the Poskim say is it's very nice to read it low, but you have to make sure that people could hear the Kriya. You have to be Yoitze Kriya Satayra, it's going to be a Brachal of Atala, so it's very nice low, but not too low. But Al Kapanim, these psukim are not low. The psukim of Va'afkav Zois B'Yosim Be'eretz Aveim is psukim of Nacham. Like Ma'astam, like Altem, and also V'Zachartil and Brisi Rishayin. These are psukim of Nachama. Interesting, is actually another pasuk of Nechama, and you realize that the Bakar is going to go loud and back down, low. If you back up a drop before, just a little bit, a pasuk or 2 before, V'zacharti es brisi Yaakov, v'afas brisi Yitzchak, v'afas brisi Avram Eskar, v'aretz Eskar. So that's also a pasuk of Nechama. And then afterwards, v'aretz Te'azav is back to the Teichecha, we go back down. Which is a little bit interesting, that Teichecha, Nechama, Teichecha, the Shla actually learns, it's in this week's Parsha, the Shla learns that this pasuk, V'zacharti es Berisi Yaakov, is actually a part of the Teichecha. And he explains the following. The Shla says, a person that sins, that's the son of a tzaddik, it's a bigger avla. A tzaddik ben Rasha, it's a bigger avla. A person grew up in a house that knows better, that saw how you're supposed to be a person that respects the Torah. And he's a Rasha, it's a bigger avla. A Rasha ben Rasha, listen, he grew up in a house, what does he know? Maybe he's a Tenek Shenishba, maybe he should have learned. But a Rasha ben Tzaddik is a bigger avla. And the same is also, says the Shla, if somebody grows up in a sviva, in a place of tzaddikim, of a good sviva, it's also a bigger avla that a person is chayta. If a person's in a place just with bad people, okay, so he got influenced, the Rambam says he shouldn't live there, but he got influenced, it's less of an avla. Says the Shla, that this pasuk is also not saying, it's not a nechama, it's the opposite. V'zacharti es berisi Yaakov, says the Rabbi Shalom, I'm going to remember that you Klal Yisrael are b'nei tzadikim, the b'nei ha'avos Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov, and also v'ha'aretz Eskar, I'm going to remember that you Klal Yisrael come from Eretz Yisrael, Avira the Aramachkim. It's from a place that elevates a person, and still Klal Yisrael was chayta. The Rabbi Shalom is saying, I'm going to include this all, which comes out, it's part of the Teichecha, Mela, technically it should be read low. The Seder Ayoim also brings Yesh Oimrim on his Pirush on Tefillah. He says also Yesh Oimrim, that it's actually a chelik of the Teichecha. But Lafi this Yesoid, in Sefer Yeshuas Yaakov, he was at the time of the K'tzais HaChoshim, and he explains, his Pirush, he has a Pirush like the K'tzais, much more chalak and bigger. It's actually a story that the Yeshuas Yaakov met the K'tzais, and he asked the K'tzais, why is it that the K'tzais' Sefer is so makubal in Klal Yisrael, and the Yeshuas Yaakov is less? So the K'tzais asked the Yeshuas Yaakov, what do you do by night? So the Yeshuas Yaakov says, I write. And the K'tzais said, I erase. In other words, he goes over what he wrote and he redoes it. Al Kapanim, the Yeshuas Yaakov says that in the davening of Rosh Hashanah, when we mention, we're maskir the Akedah, we say in Vakedis Yitzchak Lazare Ayoim Berachmem Tiskar. He doesn't focus so much on the word Berachmem, but he says that sometimes, based on this Yesod of the Shlah, sometimes there could be a Haskara, but it's not a good Haskara. So we want it to be a Haskara that Vakedis Yitzchak Berachmem, it should be a good Haskara. Mi'idach, even though we said the Shlah that says that this pasuk is actually a pasuk that it's not Nechama, the Ramban in Ve'eschanon, not over here on the Teichacha, but he brings on a different pasuk. He says, "Kamoi," like this pasuk, which is psukim of Nechama. This is also, so he learns. The Ramban learns that it's a psukim of Nechama. That Zohar that we mentioned, I looked up the Zohar just to say it over. When the Zohar explains the two Teichachas, what it's keneged, right afterwards, the Zohar, the times of Tanoim of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, the Zohar says right there and then that this pasuk of Zachartias Brisi Yaakov is a pasuk of Nechama. L'cha'ira, you can bring a raya from the davening of Musav Rosh Hashanah. We bring this pasuk in the psukim of Zachronius. We bring this pasuk v'Zachartias Brisi Yaakov. And the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah Daf Lamed Beis, the Gemara says that you're not allowed to be maskir anything in Rosh Hashanah of Peronius. So how could you bring this pasuk? L'chayr is a raya that this pasuk is a pasuk v'Zacharti of Nechama, not of Peronius. Now let's go over a little bit into the dinim, some of the halachas pertaining negei to the Teichacha. Who gets the aliyah of the Teichacha? So technically, why not anybody? So we all know, because the person that's Oila technically would be, so to speak, the feeling that he's getting the Teichacha. Where's the BECHUKOSEI, the smach for this? It's a Gemara in Shavuos. There were two Amoraim, and one of the Amoraim was saying over a pasuk. It's not even a pasuk from Teichacha, but it's a pasuk that says bad things, and the other Amoraim says, whoa, don't direct it to me. So the Achroinim take from this the concept of somebody who's Oila, Ki'ilu, the Teichacha, the Baal Koira, speaking to that person. Some want to say, I think it's the Cheshek Shleima, that it's only relevant not to this Teichacha, to the Teichacha in PARSHAS Kisavai, because over there it's Baloshin Yachid. So it sounds like as if the Baal Koira is speaking to that person standing next to him, as opposed to our Teichacha, it's Loshin Rabbim. So it's Rabbim. I mean, if anything, maybe it's anybody standing in the shul. The same discussion, I think some people are aware of it, that there are those that don't want to stand in front of the bima during the Teichacha. Also, for the same idea that as if the Teichacha shouldn't go on to them. And here also the poskim say, even if those that are makbid, it's really only negei for PARSHAS Kisavai. But interesting to note, there's such a minig, so to speak, also not to stand in front of the bima. So who gets this aliyah? There's a very interesting Ramah. The Ramah says, Lashon HaRamah, Noyagim Shloi Likrois Echad B'Shmoi Lalois. We don't call up somebody to the Torah. You don't call somebody up. So what do? Ella Kara, we call up Misha Yirtza. Whoever wants the aliyah. What does it mean, Misha Yirtza? Do you say, Yamoid, Misha Yirtza? Or does it mean we find somebody that's willing to do it? So the Bialacha speaks about it, and the Bialacha says it doesn't mean Yamoid Mish. You say Yamoid Misha Yirtza. And as a matter of fact, the time doesn't allow it, but he is different from the Achroinim. One of a Talmud of the Chassam Sofer speaks about it in length, very, very against saying Yamoid Misha Yirtza. Because it turns out, if nobody wants it, nobody comes to the Torah. It's a bezoyin Torah. In the time also of the Maral, somebody writes the same thing also. He says a gewaldige bezoyen happened, that for hours the Torah sat there and nobody went up. And I think he writes over there that I went up and I made a bracha and covered a Torah, asher me, someone's machabed the Torah. So therefore, just to say Yamad Mishayirtza doesn't work. Therefore, how the Biur explains what it means Yamad Mishayirtza, it means you prearrange who gets the Aliyah. Whether somebody that's an ani, somebody that needs it, and you offer money, which this also is a little bit of a, turns out to be a genai. So pshat is, it's like a bezoyin to get aliyah to go up. It's only somebody that nebuch needs it. Like Lamaisa, the minig by many, by a lot, is that the Baal Korah takes the aliyah. And it accomplishes, as what we mentioned before, that the Baal Korah is not talking to anybody. He's anyways leining. So he's saying, he's reading the Torah. He's not referring to the one standing next to him. Therefore, the Baal Korah is Oila. And there's no Yamid. You don't call up. You'll realize that's most places. There's no Yamid for the Baal Korah. The Baal Korah just gets the Aliyah. Here I'm also going to be Makatzer, but this is something very interesting. There are these minig in certain places, even Ad Hayoim Hazeh, I think in Minig Ashkenaz, by some places by the Chassidim, I think maybe in Vishnitz, that the Oila La Torah, let it be, the Baal Korah doesn't make a bracha before and after. The Poskim speak very, very strong against it. Different rayas. There's no time to go through it, but these Gavaldige rayas, Klora rayas, that could be even mefurish, even if you didn't make a bracha. The Zman HaMishnah, they only made one bracha in the beginning and one bracha at the end. For the Toichacha, clearly you make a bracha. The Gemara speaks about that you don't split up the aliyas in the Toichacha. The Eibusher says, Vanim is Baruch. In other words, you're clearly supposed to make a bracha. Rav Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva about it. And Rav Moshe says, even if there's a minig not to make a bracha, it's einoi minig, neged what's mavur and shas. And of course you make a bracha. But interesting to note, there is such a minig not to make a bracha before and after the Toichacha. Just to be Messiah, and I guess I'm going to leave the part 3 maybe for a different time, a different chazak, but just to be Messiah with a moiridige maisa, with Rav Moshe Feinstein. My father brings it in a sefer, Darkei Moshe. Right after the war, after World War II, in Staten Island, they asked Rav Moshe to speak in a shul, not in the yeshiva, in a different shul, a local shul over there. The shul, the mispalalim, the congregants, were all they were all survivors from the war. So what do you speak to survivors, the parsha of the Toichacha? What do you say? So Rav Moshe got up and Rav Moshe said the following: what's the smichas, the connection to the parsha of the Toichacha? To right after the Toichacha goes the parsha of Erechin. Yeah, the halachas of Erechin. A person says Erki Alai, meaning to say is he wants to give his worth to the Beis Hamikdash. What's the connection? So Rav Moshe said the following: he was machazak the Yidin. It was also at the time still that it was hard Shmira Shabbos, and he said the following. He said, for everybody it's an asayin, Shmira Shabbos, but yet even more for the survivors that came from Europe. They didn't really know English, and the meschazak, their Shmira Shabbos. He said, where do you see the erech, the value of a Yid? Is if a person goes through the Toichacha and he still keeps strong, that's the erech, the value of a Yid. That's what he said over there in the shul. In other words, they just went through the Toichacha, the war, and still they're being meschazek, the Shomer Torah mitzvahs, that's the erech of a Yid. So b'yom bahim b'zman hazeh, it's negay all the time. That's the strength of a Yid. People go through different bumps, different nisyonis. That's the nature of life. But l'maisa, Afal Pikein, a person keeps strong, that Erechin, that's what a Yid is. We should be zeicha to utilize this lesson. Have a wonderful Shabbos.